This was an immediate, unmistakable problem that was threatening the value of the building. 5 people lost use of their balconies. The rest of us could see that that problem was going to spread and not go away. That actually, if you've got something that's that obvious and that's threatening to your building, that really makes doing a special assessment easier. I read a lot about people that try to do 20-year plans and they try to build improvements and so forth in the special assessments. That's a much harder sell.
HOA Insights, common sense for common areas, exists to help all 2 million volunteer board members nationwide have the right information at the right time to make the right decisions for their future. This podcast is sponsored by 4 companies that care about board members: Association Insights and Marketplace, Association Reserves, Community Financials, and Kevin Davis Insurance Services. You'll find links to their websites and social media in the show notes.
Welcome back to HOA Insights, common sense for common areas. I'm Robert Nordlund, and I'm here today with a special guest to talk about special assessment success. Well, when there's a big project to do and no money to do it with, it's special assessment time. There are ways to stumble forward, and there are ways to move forward successfully. Well, this is episode number 39, but before I introduce today's guest expert, I want to encourage everyone to check out episode number 38, which is a great episode with co-host Julie Adamen confronting the all too common issue of board dysfunction. To catch those prior episodes, you can listen from our podcast website, www.hoainsights.org, or watch the podcast from our YouTube channel. To avoid missing episodes, subscribe to this podcast on any of the most popular podcast platforms. And if you have a hot topic, a crazy story, or an interesting question you'd like us to address in an upcoming episode, we'd love to hear from you. So leave us a voicemail message at 805-203-3130 or send us an email at podcast@reservestudy.com. Well, today it's my pleasure to welcome Roger Minch, an attorney from North Dakota who learned some important lessons as a condominium board member, passing a significant special assessment for a balcony renovation project at his high-rise condo association in, again, North Dakota. He shared those lessons learned in the November-December 2021 issue of CAI's Common Ground magazine, and that's when we first met. He also wrote 2 other 2021 articles published on the Kiplinger.com news website to address Florida's tragic June 2021 Champlain Tower South condominium collapse that claimed 98 lives. So we invited Roger as both a board hero and as a subject matter expert. So Roger, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Robert.
Well, tell us, first off, name and location of the association.
It's called The Towers. It's in downtown Fargo, North Dakota.
Fantastic. The Towers. How big of a place? How many units?
9 stories above a garage. 64 of the units had 6,000-pound concrete balconies. The first floor didn't have balconies.
Got it. Now, we've introduced you as an attorney. Do you practice community association law in North Dakota?
Yes, I do.
Is that like majority of your practice? Is that what you're known for? Or is that just one of your areas of expertise?
That's one area. I'm mostly known as a creditor's rights attorney in bankruptcy cases and commercial litigation.
So for this issue, you're, in addition to being a board member, you were also actually kind of an expert in the field. It's not like you were doing unrelated business practice or something family law. You knew what you were talking about. Yeah, knew what you were talking about. And are you still a board member?
No, I only serve as secretary.
Explain that. I usually think of a secretary being one of the board positions.
According to our documents, the president and vice president have to be board members. The secretary doesn't. And the difference is a board member has got fiduciary responsibilities to run the building in a sufficient and adequate way. If you have a secretary that's not a board member, then those duties are limited to keeping accurate books and records, taking care of the minutes, giving certain notices and so forth. All those duties are outlined in the recorded documents.
So that's almost like in addition to being a homeowner, that elevates you to and perhaps beyond a committee member. You're actually there working with the board, performing board-like duties, but it's the president and vice president that have the legal responsibility.
Yes, and being the secretary, if you're not a board member, is really a good position because you don't have the fiduciary responsibilities and the weighty responsibilities of a board member, but you do give notices. You oftentimes set the agenda by talking to board members. What do you want to have on the meeting? So you arrange the agenda, and then you can do a good or a poor job of keeping the minutes. And I try to do a good job.
Excellent. One of our early episodes was from a meeting minutes company that is able to do that on behalf of boards and ensure that they get good record of what's going on. I'm reminded of a movie I saw long ago. I think it was My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where the woman of the household was saying something to the effect of, I may not be the head of the house, but I'm the neck. And it sounds like the secretary is the neck.
That's right.
Very nice. Okay, well, tell us about the problem that led to the special assessment.
Well, our building was originally designed to never be painted. It was concrete. It was meant to always be concrete. It had these 64, we found out 6,000-pound concrete balconies.
Now, how old of a building are we talking about? And
Built in 1976.
1976, and when did the problem rear its ugly head?
About 2013. And I moved into the building in 1978. I've always been either a board member or an officer ever since. And one of the things we did after the building was about 10 years old, we decided we would have a structural audit done every 5 years. And we did that, and those audits discovered a few problems that we addressed along the way. It was in 2013 that one of those structural audits disclosed that we were developing a problem with our balconies. The building had been painted. Nobody checked with the architects whether it should have been painted or not, but that included painting the underside of the balconies. And concrete is meant to breathe. And we found out later that once the underside of the balconies were painted, by the way, that was done by the developer before the project was turned over to the owners.
Interesting. So it wasn't some unrelated outside party.
No. What had happened was the construction lenders told the developer, you're not selling those units quickly enough. If you could sell them more quickly, you could pay off the construction lending, and then we could look at permanent financing. Why don't you consider painting the building? We think that'll help you sell units.
To make it look nice, pretty it up.
And we found out later that once those balconies were painted, the concrete would no longer breathe. And over time, water would get into the rebar in the concrete balconies. Once rebar starts to rust, it expands and it'll break the surrounding concrete. And then the rebar loses its ability to support the concrete. And by 2010, probably, this had started. Our structural engineers noticed this in 2013. As a result, their recommendations were, we think we can repair these. We'll put this on a repair schedule. We'll do 5 a year. We'll pick the 5 worst, and next year the 5 worst, the 5 worst. And we did that until 2016, about early 2017. And the ones that they had repaired in 2014, the repairs were failing. And they just told us, we can't repair these. You're going to have to just replace all of these.
Ouch.
Yeah, ouch is right.
Okay. Now, I'm spinning in my brain. When I think of painting, it's often a good thing. Like with a wood fence, you want to paint it to protect the underlying wood. But when I'm thinking with concrete, when you paint it, then yes, on one hand you protect it, but when you paint the underside, you're eliminating any moisture from coming out that surface, and it's getting stuck there right next to that rebar. Is that a fair characterization?
That's right. It'll make it look better, but it takes away the permeability of concrete. Concrete is a breathing substance, and if it can breathe, Water will not get in and stay in the concrete and it won't reach the rebar. But once it's painted, especially on the underside, then it will.
It becomes a bathtub.
That's right.
Yeah, wow. You and I, when we wrap on concrete, it feels solid and impermeable. And if you spill water on it, you wipe it up. But given time, and again, if you seal it, moisture will seep in, and it'll become a sponge. And wow, a heavy balcony becomes even heavier. In addition to the rebar getting less and less strength, degenerating. Is that, again, accurate?
Exactly right.
Interesting. Okay. So you learned about it. Well, good for you. Good for you as the towers to have a structural engineer coming every 5 years, checking up on things, because that gave you a early start, an early indication of what the potential problem was. And then you started courageously doing repairs. Now, was that itself a budget breaker to do 5 a year?
No, we could well afford that within our monthly assessments and occasionally using something in our reserve fund, but that was manageable. We could have done 5 a year forever if that would have been a proper fix.
Let's see, 5 a year forever. If there was 60, that would have been 12 years. So 13 years. It seems like a reasonable cycle to go through. It's not like it would have taken forever. You were going to get through the building in a reasonable time scale at 5 per year. And then finally, you learned that what you were doing just wasn't cutting it.
First ones we repaired in 2013. By 2016, 2017, it was clear to our engineers that those repairs were not going to be effective. And they had already, some of them started to fail. To the point where the city, by the way, we let them know right away. They came in and they called it embargoed 5 of the units. They inspected all the balconies, and embargoing means that we had to bolt shut 5 of them to make sure nobody could go out on those balconies.
So like red tape, don't go out on your balcony, that kind of thing?
That's right. And then bolt shut to make sure nobody could go out even if they wanted to.
Yikes. Okay, so now you're to a point where homeowners are not able to enjoy the home that they paid for.
That's right.
So it's no longer just a little minor, oh, gee, that's someone else's problem. It all of a sudden becomes, wow, that happened here and here and here and here. When's it going to happen to my unit? So you're aware it's a bigger problem. And that was when,
2016, early 2017 is when we discovered that we were going to have to replace all of these balconies. That does bring up an interesting point. This was an immediate, unmistakable problem that was threatening the value of the building. 5 people lost use of their balconies. The rest of us could see that that problem was going to spread and not go away. That actually, if you've got something that's that obvious and that's threatening to your building, that really makes doing a special assessment easier. I read a lot about people that try to do 20-year plans and they try to build improvements and so forth in the special assessments. That's a much harder sell. So it's odd that in a way, the worse your problem is, the easier it is to make a special assessment work.
Well, Roger, I want to thank you. And we'll take a quick break here to hear from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back to hear the second half of this story.
Are you part of a homeowners association or condominium board? Making the right financial decisions for your community's future is crucial. At Association Reserves, we're proud to serve communities nationwide, specializing in reserve studies tailored to your community's unique needs. Our expert team helps you accurately assess your property's assets, forecast future expenses, and develop a solid funding plan. Whether you're a small HOA or a large condominium association, we've got you covered. Visit reservestudy.com to learn more and get a proposal for your association.
And we're back. Well, Roger, pick up on that. Tell us how a bad thing can be a good thing.
There's no debate over the need to fix the problem. That's one thing. And it focuses everybody's attention. What I learned from this experience, and I think this is a good takeaway for people, I think if you're facing a special assessment, I think the best way to think about it is like this. Your problem is not structural. It's not engineering. Engineers and architects can fix anything. Your problem, if you're facing a special assessment, believe it or not, is not even financial. If people can see that there's a problem, if they want to pay, and if they see that their investment or their home is in jeopardy, don't worry about it. They'll figure out how to find the money. You don't need to babysit that process. Your problem is political. And that means that if you've been treating your owners as ignorant nuisances for years, and then you expect them to pay a special assessment, they'll resist that and they'll repay you in kind.
No, wait.
Okay.
I know the turn of the phrase, they'll repay you in kind, but maybe in this case, we should say repay you in the same way you treated them.
That's right. That's right. And the term is political capital. And I learned that from a group of managers that I gave a program like this to. And I explained this whole thing. And then the moderator said, okay, let's talk among ourselves what you do to build political capital. You have to always have political capital enough that if you have to make a special assessment, people will be receptive to it and answer for it. And that means that you constantly keep people informed. You constantly ask them for advice. In our particular case, we told people there are going to be meetings with our architect every Monday morning at 7:30 while we're doing this project. We expect you to attend these meetings if you're interested. We want your input. We want your cooperation. We literally killed people with information to the point where somebody at a meeting said, well, Roger, you're the president. You take care of it. Don't keep bothering us with this.
Interesting.
I remember thinking to myself, okay, I'll very well do that. You just pay the assessment when it comes. And in fact, they did.
Okay, good. So describe the chemistry at the association right about when you were facing that crisis in 2016. Was it an association that was unified with the board? Had the board been treating the owners as teammates, or was there potentially adversarial situation even to start with?
We had enough political capital, Robert, when this problem developed that we had pretty smooth sailing. It helped an awful lot that we had engineers on this problem since 2013. And everyone knew about that because doing these repairs meant a lot of noise and a lot of dust. That was a hard thing in and of itself. And a lot of people were relieved to find out that we weren't going to be doing that every year. We were going to finally fix the problem. The other thing that helped is that we hired a separate law firm to make sure that we pursued every conceivable insurance recovery, every conceivable third-party recovery. And we were able to convince people on the basis of those attorney opinions that we had done everything we possibly could to address this problem, identify it early, and then make other kinds of recoveries before we would have to call on the owners on a special assessment. So
yeah, let me stop you there. So you had anticipated questions and you did your research because you knew that they were going to say, well, have you tried A? Have you tried B? Have you tried C? And before you asked for their money, you wanted to be well prepared. And also it sounds like you had a great paper trail. So you could say, we have tried these things. It's not like I think. Now, if someone's going to ask me for a special assessment, they're going to have a lot more success if they come to me saying, this is what we know and these are the facts, not, I think it would be better if.
If you ask people along the way and in advance, will you help us? What ideas do you have? What do you think we've missed? That will really maintain and enhance your political capital. But if people get the idea that they're not being involved, they're not being given information, they're being given information late.
Or it's us versus them.
Yeah, you lose your political capital in a great big hurry.
Yeah. Okay, well, how big of a special assessment are we talking about?
We did $17,500 against each of the 64 units that had balconies. At the time, units in the building were selling for anywhere from $80,000 to $100,000. So this was going on 20% of the value of these units.
You just saved me pulling out my calculator here. Yeah, so that's a big deal. So for someone to say instantly, my unit just got 20% more expensive, that's a scary proposition. And I'm glad that you had kind of prepped the owners that this was going to happen. And again, maybe a little bit of misfortune and adversity did work to your advantage, because as they were doing repairs, and I'm presuming that's going to be jackhammering out the spalling, the opening cracks up, that's noisy. And in a high rise, you feel that, you hear that. And so, yeah, you did have some of these things working to your advantage. So did you give people a choice, pay over time or lump sum? How did that get presented?
We didn't do that, and we were quite blunt about that.
Okay.
We had quite a discussion about how forthright we could be about that, but we started telling people the assessment was due on May 1, 2017. We had been telling people the fall before about what the special assessment would be. We had estimates. We were starting to look at bids. We hit that number pretty close on the head, and then we built in 10%. If you're going to do a special assessment like this, you only can do it once.
Yeah, you don't want to double dip.
No. And so everybody knew, and we specifically told them in written notices, we're not going to finance this. We're not going to be entering into payment agreements. We're not your banker. You go to your banker, you figure this out. And we were very blunt about that. I thought too blunt. But let me tell you how that worked out. The assessments were due May 1 of 2017. Within a week after that date, we had 54 of the 64 paid in full, $17,500.
That's a heck of a success.
Yeah. There were 6 more people. We called them the City 6. And we helped them work out a loan forgiveness arrangement through one of the local savings and loans and the city of Fargo. And they were able to borrow the $17,500 on a low interest basis. And then that loan would be forgiven in stages if they stayed in their units. So that took care of 6 more. So now we've got 60 of the 64. Of the 4 that didn't pay and said they wouldn't pay, we ended up filing 2 assessment liens. 2 of the other people eventually did pay from, I think, social pressure in the building. Of the 2 where we had to file assessment liens, one of them we ended up collecting from an estate. The poor old fellow died over the course of a year. The other one we collected from a bankruptcy estate because the bankruptcy lawyer for that fellow didn't file the bankruptcy case within 90 days of when we filed the assessment lien. So the lien couldn't be avoided and stayed on the unit, and he ended up paying. So thanks to the political capital, we collected every penny of all these assessments. And when the project was all done, we were able to refund about just a little over $1,600 to each of the people who'd paid the $17,500. And
that's almost 10%. Yeah.
Yeah. And we figured that's what our cushion was going to be. And we told people about that going in.
Excellent. Tell me about the vote, the board's vote to authorize a special assessment. Unanimous. And then did that have to be voted on by the ownership?
In North Dakota, Robert, I mean, I don't know if it's good or bad, but this is totally the Wild West.
Okay.
Our condominium law in North Dakota runs about 17 pages long in our Century Code, including annotated cases. There have only been 2 cases go to the North Dakota Supreme Court. And the way the law still is in North Dakota, even taking into account the Charitable Corporations Act, the board of directors has got unlimited business judgment discretion to manage the building, do special assessments. No requirement under North Dakota law, no requirement in our documents that there be a vote.
Interesting. Okay, so when the board said, and I bet there was a lot of wringing your hands, it is time. You just said, we're in this. You locked arms and said, we're in this together. It has to happen. There's no way around this. Special assessment time. And it was almost as if you got a vote of approval because 54 people wrote big checks. You had communicated enough that they were aware enough that 54 people said, yes, I'm in. So even in a state where a vote was required or governing documents were required, again, 54 out of 64, that's a slam dunk win.
We could have gotten the votes.
If you needed it, yeah.
Really, the only misgivings in this process were there were a few people that wanted us to explore more fully how much of this, it was almost $1 million project. And they wanted us to find out how much of that we might have been able to borrow. And we did look at that a little bit, but then it dawned on the lenders and it dawned on us, how are you going to secure repayment of this loan? Say they would have loaned somebody half of it, $500,000. You're not going to get members of the board of managers to personally guarantee that loan. And from the lender side, what in the world is going to be the collateral? A mortgage on the common areas? Or maybe an assignment of the association's right to levy, file, and collect assessment liens? That's about the most soft, uncertain collateral I can think of. And lenders just were not willing to do that. I've found out since that there are some national lenders that specialize in that kind of lending.
Right.
We were not aware of that. We never made that kind of an application. As it turns out, I think everybody in our building is happy that we bit the bullet, paid for it, got it done, and that's the end of it.
Well, let me follow up on that happy, because I like a story that has a happy ending. What has happened to the home values at the towers since the big special assessment project?
We've been able to stay off of the bad list with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, for example.
Right.
There's a long article about that in the last issue of Common Ground. So that allowed us to maintain our good standing with all of the lenders in the area. And soon after we had this project finished, all the building values in that building went up about 30 to 40%. They're almost double now from 2018. I really can't attribute that to repairing those balconies, although the building looks much better. You can see through the balconies. I don't know why concrete was something attractive to the developer. So some of the increase in value can be attributable to better, more modern-looking balconies. But I know a big selling point among the real estate agents is that this is a building that has been doing regular structural audits. It now has an official reserve study. The reserve study is fully funded. The building was able to spend $1 million in 2017-18 to modernize its balconies, and it was able to spend another $200,000 since to upgrade all of its old analog elevators. So the real estate agents and the lenders know that there's no deferred maintenance in our building. And I think that accounts for probably half of the increase in value. The rest of it is just general market forces in downtown Fargo.
Yeah. Well, I know that real estate agents farm their local areas, and associations can see real estate agents as their friend, pump them with good information, pump them with the reminder that the black cloud is gone, this problem is fixed. We are now freshly, you not only fixed a structural problem, but you turned it into an aesthetic increase. And it was nice to hear that 20% special assessment bounced into a very quick 30% or more boost in property values. So quickly the owners were cash positive, and a happy ending to that. And I heard you say you're still doing the every 5-year annual every 5-year structural inspections?
We've flipped that over to a reserve study. And we're coming up on, I think we're in the 4th year from doing that, and we're fully funded. And in the 5th year, we're going to have that reserve study redone.
Glad to hear it. I love a story that closes with a happy ending. And Roger, this is just a big lift for you. You and the rest of the board deserve a round of applause and a lot of appreciation for doing what you did. Was there any of that, or did you just smile when you looked at what units were selling for?
We were happy to be able to solve the problem. We were happy that people actually came up with the money to fix the problem. The building has been all together on management issues ever since. So it was a lot of work, but it was a happy outcome. And one other piece of advice, too, that I would give on a big project like this, my term on the Board of Managers ended on June 1 of 2018. The assessment, remember, was due on May 1, 2017.
Right.
I didn't quite finish all the construction work during 2017. We had leftover punch list work to do in the spring of 2018. And I was really frustrated with getting that job completely finished and getting all the bills in. And frankly, what worked was I told the general contractor and all the subs, you better get this work done and you better get your bills in so that they can be paid before June 1 of 2018.
When I go off the board.
And that's what finished it up.
Very good. A nice deadline to motivate people to get their billing done. I've heard that the kind of restaurant that you want to go to is the one that has a misspelled sign, because their focus is in the kitchen, not on the sign. And the builders, contractors may be really good at fixing buildings, but they may be slow on their billing, the admin side of things. Roger, absolutely fascinating. I want to thank you for joining us here on the program. To our audience, if you'd like to get in touch with Roger for a follow-up question, you can reach Roger at RMINCH at Circland Law. That's SERKLAND law.com. Or you can see him professionally from the Circland Law website, circlandlaw.com. Well, we hope you learned some HOA insights from today's program to help bring common sense to your common areas. We look forward to having you join us for another great episode next week.
You've been listening to HOA Insights, common sense for common areas. You can listen to the show on our podcast website, hoainsights.org, or subscribe on any of the most popular podcast platforms. You can also watch the show on our YouTube channel. Check the show notes for helpful links. If you like the show and want to support the work we do, you can do so in a number of ways. The most important thing that you can do is engage in the conversation. Leave a question in the comment section on our YouTube videos. You can also email your questions or voice memos to podcast@reservestudy.com or leave us a voicemail at 805-203-3130. If you gain any insights from the show, please do us a huge favor by sharing the show with other board members that you know. You can also support us by supporting the brands that support this program. Please remember that the views and opinions expressed by the podcast do not constitute legal advice. You'll want to consult your own legal counsel before making any important decisions. Finally, this podcast was expertly mixed and mastered by Stokelight Video and Marketing. With Stokelight on your team, you'll reach more customers with marketing expertise that inspires action. See the show notes to connect with Stokelight.